All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a topic that is wonderfully dark and honestly, super atmospheric. We're going to use a grim Gothic fable to dissect the Fitian dialectic. Now, I know philosophical concepts like that can sound incredibly intimidating, but instead of reading from some dry textbook, we're going to look at this through a story. We've got a stagnant kingdom, a silent jester, and a terrifying dragon. We'll use these really vivid symbols to understand how, sometimes, true growth actually requires absolute destruction. So, picture this. We begin our journey right from the perspective of an incredibly ancient, terrifying force. Imagine a primal dragon, watching from the crags for eons, just quietly observing a world down in the valley that completely prefers its own shadows. Now, to the people actually living in this valley, the dragon is nothing but a terror, right? It's a force of pure destruction that haunts their every waking dream. But, as we're about to see, this dragon's purpose is far more profound than just breathing fire. It's actually acting as a primal instinctual mirror of nature itself. And I love this imagery because it brilliantly illustrates the kingdom's history and perfectly sets the stage for everything that follows. See, for centuries, this society has been humming with this deep underlying tension. Think of it like a musical chord left completely unresolved. You know that feeling when a note is just left hanging? That tension is being sustained by every single lie they've told in the name of peace. This systemic dishonesty has built up this desperate, almost suffocating pressure just beneath the surface, and it is absolutely begging for a final, terrifying resolution to finally break their long silence.
Okay, let's move into our first section. Thesis: the Kingdom of Fragile Masks.
So let's look at this society. It is defined by a really deep moral rot. These people are completely trapped in their own stagnation. Over time, they've suffered a total loss of the vital ability to self-reflect. Instead of facing who they actually are, they hide behind what the sources call the silence of heaven. They treat their social roles, a priest's robes or a knight's armor, as if they are absolute truths, rather than the fragile masks they actually are. The whole shebang is basically a society built entirely on maintaining manicured illusions just to avoid dealing with reality. Moving right along to Section 2, Antithesis Part 1, The Jester's Social Mirror. Because the kingdom categorically refuses to look within, they're introduced to two outside forces that act as mirrors. And it's fascinating how these two forces work in tandem. First, you have the jester. He is the social mirror. He moves in total silence through the gilded halls of the palace, constantly challenging the moral rot of their social contracts and reflecting all their hypocrisy right back to their faces. Then, on the flip side, we have the dragon, the primal mirror of nature. While the jester works quietly from the inside, the dragon brings this roaring, absolute destruction from the outside to challenge the stagnation of their very spirits. They're literally two halves of a single purpose. Together, they provide the uncomfortable but completely necessary friction required to just strip away all those artificial facades the kingdom relies on. Next up, Section 3, Antithesis Part 2, The Primal Fichtean Paradox. Now, obviously, the kingdom sees the dragon as the ultimate villain. To them, it's a creature of pure, malicious destruction. But they don't yet understand the Fichtean paradox that defines the dragon's existence. This paradox reveals something incredible. A force that appears purely negative and oppositional is in reality the exact necessary catalyst they need for their greater good. It's a confrontation they are desperately trying to avoid, but one they absolutely, fundamentally require. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to talk about the concept of the not-self. The dragon essentially embodies this not-self. It is the wild, untamed reality that stands in direct, aggressive opposition to everything this society has artificially constructed. The people living there have spent centuries just trying to ignore this wild reality outside their walls. But, as we know, true growth simply cannot happen in the safety of the dark. It demands the heat of a flame that burns away the old to make room for the new. And the dragon itself puts it perfectly, declaring, "I am negation made real." By becoming this literal, tangible force of negation, the dragon acts as a massive disruption, expressly designed to shatter the kingdom's comfortable status quo. Because the kingdom refuses to reflect from within, this huge, destructive force has to step in from the outside to force the world's narrative to finally move forward. All right, Section 4, Synthesis Part 1, The Blight of Revelation. When the dragon's shadow finally falls across those high towers, they feel it as this massive blight of revelation. It's a painful, highly damaging truth that strikes right through their comfort like a disease. But here is the absolute key takeaway. This destruction isn't born of malice, not at all. It's a rhythmic necessity. Remember that unresolved musical chord of lies we talked about earlier? The dragon's terrifying roar is simply the final note that completes that long, unresolved chord. It finally brings the necessary resolution to centuries of silence.
And all of this builds into a concept called forced illumination. The dragon's fire doesn't just blindly consume everything, it actually illuminates. First, it literally and metaphorically lights the room, making sure absolutely no corner is left in shadow. Second, the flames strip away all those fragile masks. Suddenly, the priest loses his robes, the knight loses his armor, and finally, the inhabitants are left completely exposed, with nothing left to hide behind except their raw, existential selves. By systematically burning away all their hypocrisies, the dragon forces them to finally see and understand the truth of who they actually are.
Which brings us to our final section. Section 5, Synthesis. Part 2, An Existential Reckoning. So, stripped of their social standing, their manicured illusions, and their so-called absolute truths, the survivors are pushed into the final phase of this dialectic. This is the existential reckoning. This is the true purpose that the jester and the dragon were always destined to bring to the valley. Their ultimate goal was to clear the smoke of the kingdom's illusions. The dragon might be viewed as the big bad villain of their story, but ultimately, it's the mirror that gave the kingdom back its sight. By acting as this undeniable force of negation, the dragon provided the catalyst for a greater truth, leaving the survivors to stand in the light of a reality that is, finally, painfully real. I want to leave you with this really provocative question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Imagine if a force of pure negation were to suddenly light up the comfortable shadows of your own life. If it stripped away your titles and your social armor, what raw, existential self would be left standing in the light? As the smoke of your own illusions clears, what is your actual role in a world that might just be much wider and way more dangerous than you ever dared to imagine? Take a minute to think about that. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep questioning the shadows.